You are tuned into the Power Chord Hour right here on 107.9 WRFA, as well as the Power Chord Hour podcast. However you are checking this out, I appreciate it very much for checking it out. I am very excited today. One of my favorite guests in Power Chord Hour history, and easily one of my favorite guests last year. We got Marko DeSantis back with us. Last time, I want to say we talked Popsico, but that's really selling that interview short. We talked your entire career, which I loved. I really felt like a fan. I learned things I didn't know about. And I'm sure we'll get into more than just what we're here for today. But today we are talking, celebrating, if you will, Palm Trees and Power Lines for its 20th anniversary, the Sugarcult classic. Probably how I would probably say, if memory serves me, no pun intended, if memory serves me well,
I see what you did there.
Introduction to Sugarcult and Marko. So we're to get into it with Marko right now. Marko, man, how are you?
I'm so good, man. Thanks for having me. Very happy to be here. And the only thing that's a bummer is that we're talking about Palm Trees and Power Lines 20th anniversary, which means 20 years goes by a lot faster than you would think.
I always, I know that's a cliche, but I do sometimes ask that with the album anniversaries. It's like, does it feel like, insert year there? So, I mean, I guess we can start with the cliche. Does it feel like 20 years?
Well, kids, the days get longer and the years get shorter. So, enjoy every moment. Yeah, no, it's weird. It's such a blur, man. Like, just being in bands for so many years and making those records, it feels like another lifetime ago, and it feels like just yesterday. It's kind of weird. All these things have happened. Obviously 20 years is a long time, but all these things have happened, all these changes and all these, evolutions. But I don't know, if nothing else, it's, and I think I've said this before when I was talking about the 20-year anniversary of our previous record, Start Static. And when I talked to you about Popsico, when we put out that record I had from the band before Sugarcult, if nothing else, it's a testament to, what the importance of making records, of what a record is. A record is kind of just this little mile marker in time. And you just kind of put it in there, and then time just keeps on going. But at least you can kind of go back and go, okay, well, 20 years ago, that's where we were at. And once in a while, you get that thing where you're reluctant. You're like, oh God, if I go back and check out Palm Trees and Power Lines, is it going to make me cringe? And I'm just delighted to report that. I mean, I don't get high off my own supply. I don't go back and listen to our records all the time, but every once in a while you go back and check it out, or someone else is talking about it. So you're like, oh, let me go check that out. And I'm very proud to say that in my opinion, it holds up. And that was kind of our biggest, mission along the way was, somewhere along the way, we figured out that, time was going to elapse, and, music movements come and go. And we really made, if there's one thing we made a concerted effort to do, it was to try to make durable records that would stand the test of time and definitely resist the gravitational pull and temptation of following, whatever trends might have existed in the moment, which is hard for any band to do, because you always want, like I always say, no one wants to elect themselves as the class nerd and not sit at and decline their invitation to the cool kids table. But unfortunately, when you do take the bait and go to the cool kids table, that's where you start to become trendy. And there's nothing wrong with that. Lots of records were made that were very timely, and that turned out to be durable classics as well. But, we set out to just make really good rock and roll records, despite all the, genre classifications that might have been, assigned to us by journalists and people, so it's cool. I'm really glad to listen back to that record and go, hey man, we made a good record. It's a really good, in my opinion, it's a really good example of a sophomore record, of the record you make after your first record, which is technically what it is, even though to the Sugarcult purists, they know that before Start Static, which was technically our debut, we had a collection called Wrap Me Up in Plastic, which is long since out of print, which some people call our first record, but it's really not. It's just kind of a collection of our early demos. So our first record is really Start Static, and our second record would be the one we're talking about today, Palm Trees and Power Lines.
Well, I got to give you credit too, because like you're talking about making an album that, like you were saying, where 20 years later you can listen to it and not cringe at your own work. But I also got to give you credit because going off of that, like for me as a listener, I discovered you guys again around the time this album came out. I'm 31, so I was like 11 or 12 when I like discovered you. But the thing is a lot of the things I was listening to at 11 or 12, I wouldn't want to listen to now. Like this album, I can still listen to this album. It's not a nostalgia, fest. It's not like I have to listen to it, and the only reason I like it is, oh, it reminds me of middle school. Like I've liked it consistently throughout the years, and I can't say that about everything I listened to in my like teenage, years like that. So yeah, I have to give you credit, because it doesn't mean that just because I listened to it, when it came out 20 years ago, that I'd want to discuss it and dissect it like we're about to. So
yeah. And I mean, that was, again, that was something that you can't really plan that, because you don't know what's going to happen in time, but you can aspire to it and then just sort of hope, and that's really what we hoped. We hoped that this would be a record that would, that would grow up with our fans. If you were listening to this when you were 15, maybe it was serving a purpose to you in your youthful angst, and now you're maybe in your 30s and maybe you've started a family, or maybe what you're doing, grown-up-y things, and you can go back and listen to this record, and like you said, you get a little bit of that hit of nostalgia, which always kind of feels good. It's like records are like weird little time machines that can bring you back to other times, but also I don't know, it's weird. It's almost like, I know this sounds really nerdy, but like I'm the same way with like films and books. Like there's certain books and movies I like to watch at different chapters, as different chapters of my life evolve. And it's really interesting. It's the same movie, it's the same book, it's the same record, but you tune into different parts of it that you maybe weren't ready for the first time. And maybe it's weird with records. I find myself going back and listening to records where like the songs I used to love when I was 16 now are like, they're pretty cool. But the ones I used to skip over are like my favorite ones. Yes. So it's the same thing with like movies. You used to watch it for this reason. Now you watch it and you're like listening in you're tuning into a part of it that used to go over your head. And I feel like, I mean, you know what? I'm just trying to tell people to do this so I can get so I can make 14 cents on Spotify, but go back and listen to Palm Trees and Power Lines tonight and see if it resonates. And I bet, and you're welcome to DM me on Instagram and we can, I'd love to talk to you about it, but I'm really curious to talk to people like you who are, listened to it when they were a child and now they're grownups. Or people that were maybe teenagers and listening to it, and even people that were like in their early stages of their adulthood listening to it, maybe in their, while they were in college. I'm really curious to see what someone's appraisal is of our songs 20 years later. It's just kind of cool. Like I'm honestly more interested in what people who are listeners of our music have to say about our record than I am in what we have to say about our record, because we already made our record. We put the music down, but like our record, I know this sounds really corny, but like our record doesn't really belong to us. It belongs to the world. It's kind of like we made the record and we delivered it to the world, and now it's like it's your record. What it means to your life is way more important than what it means to our life. I mean, maybe it helps me like keep the lights on every once in a while. Maybe I get a check in the mail once in a while, and I have some really fond memories of it. But what really the legacy of any record anyone makes, not just our band, is really what it means to the people that it resonates with, the fans or whatever. Yeah. Well, no, I am. I'm a fan. I listen to lots of records, and they're my records. Even though I didn't make those records, they're like the soundtrack to my life.
No, and I think you're right. I love the idea too of how bands kind of change. An album can change what it meant to you or your favorite songs and stuff. There's tons of albums I can think of where I got into it at a young age, but I probably wasn't until like my mid-20s that I really got it. Like later on, like Pleased to Meet Me is one of my all-time favorite records, but like I just kind of liked it the first couple of years that I heard it. Like I had the album when I was like 16, but it wasn't until I was like in my early 20s. I'm like, oh no, Paul Westerberg is like the greatest songwriter of all time. It's like, oh no,
I
this is the
know.
greatest thing ever. So there are
I
things
know.
where it's like I liked it from the get-go, but it wasn't the first listen that made me, it like head over heels. So you are right about that, where I think things take with time, and also your relationship to music changes with time. So, it's
Yeah.
cool talking an album 20 years later.
I think a lot of music is an acquired taste, and I've had like lots of people like kind of I won't say they're late to the party, but I've had lots of people who are like, I finally got around listening to your band, and I honestly thought I didn't like your band 10, 15 years ago because I assumed you were a certain type of band, and then I kind of accidentally stumbled upon your music and I realized like, wow, I love this band. So lots of people, also miss records because they maybe they're in that teenage sort of tribal phase of their life where they're not allowed to listen to that record. I mean, myself included. Like when I was a kid, I was like a metal kid when I was like, in sixth and seventh grade, and I just completely ignored things like The Cure and Depeche Mode and the Smiths and Love and Rockets and all these things that later on I was like, oh my God, this is incredible.
Yeah.
I love this. And it's kind of fun. I didn't know that music was cool because I wasn't ready for it yet, and I was so tribal. I didn't think I was allowed to like that kind of music because that was the kid that I didn't sit next to in class, and we were sort of on different sides of the railroad tracks. And it's funny because now it's like I'd rather go see Duran Duran. I'd probably rather go see Duran Duran than Iron Maiden, even though I love Iron Maiden too. But like, you know what I mean? It's like I think John Taylor's just as rad of a bass player as Steve Harris. But when you're a kid, you can get kind of tribal about what you're into, so it's just part of the fun of being a music fan in general. It's just like certain things you catch in their moment, and certain things you get the sort of fun of catching retroactively. A lot of my favorite records are records that came out before I was even born,
Yes.
or before I was, I mean, like the Replacements were around when I was around, but I was too young to really get it. And it took me like, I had to retroactively get into the Replacements. And then of course I became obsessed with them. But I have friends that are like, 5 years older than me that are like, yeah, dude, I saw the Replacements when I was in college. And I'm like, damn, dude, I was still just kicking around, like, it's crazy. I even think about like even like some of my favorite bands, like the Clash, like they came to my hometown and played while they were still a band. And I was just a little bit too young. I was like still a child, but I'm like, man, if only, it'd been so cool to be able to say I got to see that.
It's like a time machine one. If you could go back. The Ramones played once in where I live, but it was like 1979, like them and the Runaways, and we never get anything like that here. So yeah, if I could have a time machine, definitely go back and see the Ramones and the Runaways like a mile from my house.
I know, dude. I heard stories because I grew up in Santa Barbara. I heard stories of people like they're like, dude, we saw the Ramones play at the roller rink. There was like a little like roller skating rink, and I'm like, man, I just wish I would have just happened to be like a little kid, like at a roller skating birthday party, and just even like seen them sound check would have been cool to say,
change your life. Like if you understood in the moment, it could change your life, kind of thing.
I know, but it's so fun. It's just such a fun journey. The whole thing of just being into music, and I hope I'm not being redundant because I know you've interviewed me before, but like I always say, it's like this, it's kind of, I always think it's like that Shel Silverstein book, The Giving Tree, where it's like at different phases of your life, the tree, like in that book, if you haven't read that book, you got to read that book. It's great. Especially if you have kids, but like, it's like this tree that at different phases of life gives this kid like what he needs at the time. Like when he's a little kid, he needs something to play on. Yeah. When he's like a teenager, he needs somewhere to like make out with his girlfriend. When he's like a young adult, he needs some way to make money. So he like harvests the apples. And then when he gets to be more successful, he needs he wants to go on like wild vacation. So he cuts it down and turns it into a canoe. And then when he's old, he's like an old man, he comes back and the tree's like, I got nothing left for you, man. You've taken everything, my branches, my apples, you built a house with it, you built a canoe with it, you sold all my apples, and there's just nothing but a stump left. And the old man's all like, and he just like sits down on the stump. And so it's like, there you go. exactly what an old person needs is somewhere to rest, so it's like
Yeah.
music's like that too. It's kind of like throughout every phase of your life, it gives you something else you need. It gives you identity when you're young. Gives you something to maybe learn how to play if you want to start a band or whatever. Gives you, it's just this like backdrop to your life. And then as life goes on and 20 years goes by, it gives you this amazing, like you're saying, this approximation of a time machine where you can just like kick it in your room, put on a record from 20 years ago, and you kind of get transported back to like whoever your friends were back then, wherever it was you lived, what was going on in the world at the time. And it could take you back to a simpler time, which is sometimes a nice reprieve from, the constant fire hose barrage of modern life. Music's a really safe space to return to. And also it can be something that, just keeps you going for more. Like I'm going and checking out new bands all the time, the Bad Nerves or whatever we were talking about.
So good.
It just makes you kind of go, you know what, man, there's always something cool. There's a new record being made right now as we speak somewhere in the world that we're going to hear in a few months, or maybe get turned on to 3 years from now. And we're going to be like excited about it, and it's just kind of cool.
That makes me excited. You just saying that gets me excited because you're right. Like we don't know what it is, but somebody right now could be writing our like next favorite album.
Oh,
We don't
100%.
know.
And even deeper than that, there's someone who's just born right now as we speak during this podcast. Someone's just being born, and like 15 years from now, they're going to be learning how to play an instrument. And then maybe 20 years from now, they're going to be making a killer record. And then we're all going to be talking about it, And I'm thinking about like current band that I think is really cool. It's called Scowl. Have you checked them out yet?
No.
Oh, they're awesome. They're female fronted. They're kind of hardcore punk, but they're really great. And I mean, I'm thinking that girl was probably a baby, if not maybe just born when we made Palm Trees and Power Lines. And right now she's like crushing it on festival stages and winning over crowds, and has this band that I'm excited and listening to. And it's just, it's exciting. It's so cool.
That is very exciting. And a testament to, like you're saying, how the music keeps going 20 years ago.
Keeps renewing itself. And I think that's also important as we get, as we all, get older. It's important. I say this to my fellow, rock and roll elders out there. It's like, I really want to invite people to stay fluid and stay curious and stay excited about music, and not kind of, harden yourself and think that only, the only version of the truth that matters is your version. Like, a lot of people can get like that. They can get really kind of, really dogmatic about their views on like, oh, this is, music today. It's not real music. It was real when I was a kid, and that's just such a bum out. You're just going to close the doors on so much cool, new,
so many things.
There's so much. Yeah. Just, you got to stay open-minded, and just, when you dropped into the scene, whenever it was that you had your kind of rock and roll awakening or whatever it is, like, there was people ready to tell you that your version of punk rock, your version of rock or whatever wasn't the real thing. And, if you would have listened to them, where would you be? It's like, we got to keep moving forward and checking new stuff out. And, I mean, there was this festival in LA just the other day. I actually didn't get to go. I thought I was going to get to go and it didn't work out, but it's called No Values. And
that looks so good.
Yeah, it looked great. But like, for example, that girl, that girl who fronts a band called Scowl, like they played, and like maybe a couple bands later, Iggy Pop played. So you got someone who's probably old enough to be her, her grandpa
easily.
And then, and they're both playing, and it's like, they're both still viable, and they're both still, it's like, as long as you're, and it's not like Iggy Pop's up there saying, okay, well, this died with me, he's going, hey man, let's bring on the new stuff too. It's really cool.
No, I do. I love that festival. I did like seeing kind of more, there were some modern bands in there along with all those. I mean, punk legends, honestly.
Yeah.
A lot of legends in there, but it was cool to see the fresh blood too, to like, not stay in just one era. Go like, yeah, punk didn't die in like 1984 or something.
Oh yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, you got to keep it vibrant and new, and I love that. And a lot of the people I've met from older, like kind of legendary bands, they're just a lot of them are just so cool and so excited about new stuff. And that's just, they kind of, the people you meet in the bands that you look up to, sometimes they'll let you down when you say you shouldn't meet your heroes, but sometimes they really kind of like inspire you and show you the way,
Yes.
Like I remember meeting Joan Jett. She made a real impression on me. Like she was just so full of enthusiasm, and she was so vibrant and so just curious and excited about music still. And you're like, man, you are like literally, you've been a teenager for like 50 years and look at you, like she just perfected the art of being a music fanatic, and, definitely, I actually, this is so crazy, but I was just in New Orleans for my birthday.
Oh, nice.
Went out there. It was super fun. One of my good friends plays in the Foo Fighters and that I grew up with. And it was my birthday and they were playing on my birthday in New Orleans. So I was like, I kind of played the birthday card as an excuse to go out there. And we ended up getting to see the Rolling Stones the day before.
Oh man.
It was amazing. Yeah. So it was like watching the Stones in New Orleans from the side of the stage. I've never, seen the Stones many times in my life, but I've never seen them from the side of the stage. And then sure enough, the next day, the Foos were playing the same stage, and apparently the Rolling Stones had a couple days off, so they stuck around. And I look over, and there's Pat Smear, who to me is a total legend, from the Germs and
Punk rock
obviously
legend.
Yeah, Nirvana and the Germs and so many other bands. And like he's up there jamming on stage with the Foos, and right on his side of the stage, standing over by his guitar tech, is Ron Wood, from the Stones and Faces and all those amazing British bands. And I'm just like, man, the generations that are happening right now, this is just for me as a music fan nerd, I'm just like geeking out so hard. I'm like, there's like the guy from Nirvana, the guy from the Germs, the guy from the Faces, the guy from the Rolling Stones, like, and we're all on the same stage right now at the same moment in the same,
Yeah.
And that guy's 77 years old. That guy's in his 60s. That guy's in his 50s. And it was just like, I was like, man, this is such a fun community, this whole world of rock and roll, like that guy, 77 years old, he'd be forgiven to be chilling in his, penthouse suite at the Ritz-Carlton, enjoying running a bath. But no, he's on his day off, he's coming down to see another rock band play, where the guys in the band are young enough to be his kids, and it's just like, that's just so badass. It's so inspiring. Yeah. Of course, I had to go over and punish Ron Wood. I went over and like weaseled my way over there and was like, "Hey man, I'm sorry to bother you. Can we get a picture together?" And we got a picture together. So I was like,
"Oh yes. No, that's a great birthday! My God, what a fun
it was so epic, man. It was. If you go to my Instagram, I posted like there's one little thing that flips through, and there's a bunch of pictures from that. It was super fun. Yeah.
God, I can't. Normally, I try to impress people with I once saw the Rolling Stones front row, but you kind of got me beat there with side stage.
Dude, I mean, that's pretty awesome. But yeah.
Now that's like, actually not to go on a tangent, but like talking about not appreciating things till later. I was like 11 and I didn't really care. Elvis Costello opened. It was Elvis Costello and the Stones, and we had front row. And I mean, like, I'm not saying I didn't care, but I get it. Tired of it after like 40 minutes. It smelled like cigarettes or a lot of hippies. I was like, what is that? Like, it was much more for my parents. Like,
years later, your parents made a great investment in your well, actually, I have two kids, and my oldest, when it's funny, it was my birthday. This was, years ago. And the Stones were playing in LA, and I hadn't bought tickets because, they're so oppressively expensive. But then like the day of the show, they announced that there was like it was like tickets are made, a new batch of tickets are being made available, and they're going to be super affordable, but you have to buy them in pairs. You have to buy two, and you don't know. And it's a lottery. You could be in the front row, you could be in the back row, you could be anywhere in between, but the tickets are going to be like whatever, $80, which, is cheap for the Rolling Stones. And so I just like jumped through all the hoops and got online and I bought the two tickets. And then I was like, well, God, who am I going to go with? It's like, it's my birthday. And if I bring this friend, then that friend's going to be mad that I didn't ask them. And I was like, I don't want to bring, and then I was like, I don't really want to bring my wife because she's not like that into the Rolling Stones. And it's no fun to like have someone who's kind of enduring the show.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, she doesn't not like him. She just doesn't like him as much as me. So she wouldn't be And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to bring my kid. And like, he was only 8 years old. And it was going to be his first concert. I mean, he saw Sugarcult when he was like 2, but like it was going to be his first real concert. And I was like, that would be such a cool thing to be able to say for the rest of your life. Like, my first show ever was the Rolling Stones.
That's a big one.
Especially in his generation, because like he'll be around when the Stones are long gone, you know. So it'll be a cool thing to be able to say you got to do, you know. And so I mean, at that point he was a child and he had never, you know, his bedtime was like 7:30 and the show didn't even start till like maybe 8, you know? So I was like, I went and I was like, dude, if this is like too overwhelming or if you're tired, we can just go. I've seen this band before. Like, I just, you know, we'll see how it goes. And he totally rocked it and was like there the whole time. And, you know, he made the greatest point. This is such a kid observation. He's like, because the seats were pretty far back. He's like, this is so great having these seats far back because they don't look like they don't look old from back here.
Yeah, I saw them in like 03, and yeah, they were looking a little old. I mean, they were great, dude. But yeah.
I saw them when I was still in high school, and they looked old. I mean, they've been old longer than they were ever young at this point. I mean, they've been a band for 60. Let's see, they started in 1962, so they've been a band for 62 years. Twice your life.
Oh my God. Okay, and yeah, you put it that way. Yeah, they had. I guess that's true. They have that. There's a reason they look like that, and still amazing performers. Not taking anything away.
They do great. You know, it was a trip watching them from up close. You know, because like you'd see them like kind of walk backstage behind the little curtain, and they would like kind of turn into old men. Like they would walk really slow and like hang on to things. And then you just watch them emerge and then like sort of ramp up with energy and then just be out in the audience, like you're not, you know, out on the stage rocking out, but you kind of saw like how they do it. Like they're really smart at conserving their energy and then just like letting it rip once they get on stage, you know?
Yeah.
It's a trip.
I love it. I hope I get to see him again at least one more time.
You should. I mean, I always tell people, you know, we're alive at the same time as these like, as Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan. They're still walking the earth, and they're still, despite the fact that they have billion, you know, I mean, Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan both are like billionaires, and they're still generous enough to go out, even though they're like in their twilight years, to go out and play shows. Like, to me, that's like such a generous thing to do. Yeah. Even they don't have to do anything. They haven't had to do anything in 45 years.
You don't need the money.
They do it. They don't need the money. They're just doing it because it's who they are. But like the fact that you can just literally pay some money or pull out your credit card and get a ticket and go see them while they're alive is, I mean, of course they're not like as vibrant and relevant as they were when they were young, but they're still, I mean, to me, it's just like, I don't know. I'm just like such a rock and roll romantic. Like, to me, it's like, you know, it's like being a Catholic and going to meet the Pope. Like to me, being a rock and roll maniac and going to see Bob Dylan or Paul McCartney or the Stones, it's like, or Iggy Pop, you know,
yes.
It really is kind of spiritual. Like you feel like, wow, man, I'm like, you know, I'm in the same space as like these architects of this culture that we're all part of. You know, we have podcasts about, we formed bands because we were, you know, such big fans of music. And, you know, I mean, I'm resting my computer on books about music, you know, it's such a culture that we like are so obsessed with. And the people who literally built that culture some of them are still around, you know. I got to see Chuck Berry while he was alive.
Oh, now that'd be one I'd love to see, or would have loved to see.
Insane. I met him really quickly. And I just shook his hand and I was like, you know, I met Paul McCartney once.
Oh, nice.
And I got to see Willie Nelson play. You know, he's still around. You can still go see Willie Nelson. You know, he's 92 years old. It's, you know, it's amazing. I got to see James Brown while he was alive. I got to see
Man. That's the
Prince.
best performer of all time, James Brown.
James Brown was insane. I saw James Brown. I saw Prince. I saw David Bowie in Tokyo, Japan. I mean, one day it's funny. My friends always, they're like, dude, one day you got to write a book just of all the like rock and roll memories you have of like, all these cool
I agree
things.
with
like,
them.
Well, my memories are no better than more valid than anybody else's. But I suppose I should write them down while I still remember them.
Listen, the other day on Instagram, there's a picture of you or a video of you at the Ramones tribute, and then just John Travolta's kind of in the background. Like, you get into some pretty cool places, man. I think you write a pretty good rock and roll book.
I've been on a roll lately, man. It's been a good run the last couple months. But yeah, that Ramones tribute that Johnny Ramone's widow, Linda Ramone, does this thing. She used to do it every year, and then I think maybe once the pandemic hit, she stopped for a while. And this was the first one in a long time. And dude, it's so cool. Like, first of all, they raise all the money because Johnny Ramone died from prostate cancer. So they actually like all the money they raise goes to like cancer research, which is kind of cool, you know? And it was just like, it was so fun. It was like it's this big cemetery in Hollywood called Hollywood Forever.
I've been
like
there. I visited.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's
I've been to Los Angeles once, and that was like one of my first stops was to go see Dee Dee and Johnny's grave.
Oh yeah. You can go see Dee Dee and Johnny's grave, and Chris Cornell is buried there from Soundgarden, and Howie Pyro is there. I mean, there's a bunch of music icons, but there's also just like so many like silver screen icons there, a
lot of old Hollywood.
Yeah, it's a trip. I mean, I'm not a big fan of like graveyards and that kind of stuff. Kind of freak me out a little bit, but like if you just suck it up and go, it's actually kind of, in a weird way, it's actually kind of life affirming. Like you're walking around, and instead of being depressing, it kind of refills your it puts wind in your sails to be like, you know what, man, we're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time. Like let's not get ourselves bogged down with all these, all this negativity and squabbles. Let's just enjoy this ride and make the most of it. Cause you look around, you're like, man, sure, it would be cool to have someone make a sculpture of me, with playing a guitar. Like, I mean, Johnny Ramone was just a kid who was born in New York and formed a band with his friends and lived his life. And now he's like immortalized in this legendary cemetery,
Yeah.
Yeah. I got to see the Ramones too. I met just about every Ramone. Yeah, I met every Ramone, which was really cool at some point or another. Yeah, dude, other than my Sugarcult stories, I've got a whole book worth of rock and roll stories.
See, I love them because that's like, I mean, as we've talked about, you and I have like the same musical taste. So it's like, I'm as excited to talk about Sugarcult as hearing you meeting Chuck Berry. I'm like, one of the, when you go back to rock and roll, the beginning of rock and roll, I mean, like you're meeting one of the originators. Like that's,
I mean, dude,
like almost as far back as you can go.
I mean, dude, and he did not disappoint. Like you hear the stories about Chuck Berry, like basically if you wanted him to play, you had to pay him cash. He would only play for cash. He's super old school. You had to pay him cash. You had to get him a Lincoln Continental. You had to meet him at the airport with a Lincoln Continental, and you had to pay him half the cash up front, half the cash as soon as he was done playing the show. And you had to organize a band for him because he didn't travel with his own band. He just shows up at the airport with his guitar, Lucille, with that classic, iconic, same guitar I played in Sugarcult, but just he was playing the original version of the one I played a copy of. And he'd show up at the airport, just Chuck Berry with his suitcase and his guitar. And like, we're not talking about like tour managers and guitar techs or any of that kind of crew. It's just like, there's Chuck Berry. The promoter picks him up, hands him half the cash, drives him to the hotel or whatever, picks him up, takes him to sound check. He works it out with the band. They go on stage and play. The band's the pickup band. They're just like watching him. And he's legendary for like people who play with him. They kind of get briefed. Like, by the way, like be on your, you gotta be, ready, because he might just like change his mind right before they're going to play the song and change the key and be like, oh, by the way, we're going to do it in C. And you're like, whoa, I thought we were doing it in E. So you just got to be like ready for action. And you just play the show. And then as soon as he's done with the show, he waves to everybody. He walks down, the engine's running in his Lincoln Continental. His guitar case is in the back with it popped up. He pops the trunk, sticks his guitar case in there, hops in the car. Promoter gets in the other seat, hands him the rest of the cash, and then he just drives off. That's the gig with Chuck Berry, who's, of course, now no longer with us. But I got to watch that happen. He played at this thing called Hootenanny that they used to do out in LA. And I went out because my buddy Chris, who plays in the Foo Fighters, his solo project was playing his like sort of honky tonk country thing that he does. And they were playing this festival. And I was like, dude, I'm going to this because I can get in through Chris. But the main reason I'm going is to see Chuck Berry. And actually, Jerry Lee Lewis, who's the legendary piano player,
another one would love
he was
to
on
see.
the bill too. And we get there, and there was like signs at the front saying that he had like some medical emergency and couldn't do the gig. So I was bummed I never got to see him. And of course, he's long gone now. But Chuck Berry was there, and I wormed my way. I mean, he didn't sound that great. Of course, he was like 83 years old. But just to see him, it's not about how great he sounds.
Berry. Like it's you saw Chuck Berry.
That's Chuck Berry, and like that's one of a kind, And he basically, between him and Little Richard and I don't know, maybe Ike Turner, basically invented rock and roll. I mean, truly, and like it was such a trip. And then I just kind of made the bold move, and I wormed my way backstage, and I saw his Lincoln Continental. I just kind of posted up next to it, and I saw him do the whole interaction with the promoter getting in there and giving him his money. And then this was so sweet. This was like, there was some woman standing on the stage. Maybe it was like the wife of one of the guys in one of the other bands. We froze up. Anyway, there was this woman with like holding like a small child, like maybe like a 4-year-old. And she must have been like the wife of one of the people in the other bands. And she was just like up there, and the kid was cute. And I just see Chuck Berry right before he's about to like start the engine and take off. He like gets out of the car and like slowly walks over there and like hands the woman like $10 or $20 or something, like for her kid, like when an old person sees like a kid and they like give him money, to, like buy an ice cream or something. It was like the cutest thing ever. I'm like, man, he like thought that's so adorable. There's like a kid backstage. I'm going to be like the cool grandpa and like give him some money. And then he got in his car and started to slowly drive away. And I just went up to the window and I was like, dude, what's up? And I shook his hand, and he actually signed a quick autograph for me on some scrap of paper. So awesome. So awesome. I mean, as you probably have guessed, I'm such a I'm such a fanboy about all this stuff. It's just so exciting,
Oh,
and it's not like, I mean, they're just people, but at the same time, I was at that Ramones thing, and like, I'm looking around and I'm like, dude, there's John Travolta. And wow, first of all, how cool is it that John Travolta is like connected to the Ramones?
Right.
And they were airing like the 30th anniversary of Pulp Fiction. Talk about
nice.
Time flying. I mean, I saw Pulp Fiction in the theaters. Jesus, been around for a minute, but like, so it was, and by the way, that movie is so good. It's like so iconic. And I remember seeing it when it came out, and I was like, this is going to be one of those movies that's just going to be like, we're going to look at like The Godfather or something. It's going to be like, Annie Hall. It's going to be one of those movies that just goes on forever, becomes this iconic classic. You just knew it the first time you saw it. And there's John Travolta, and I'm like, okay, I have to go up and like meet him real quick. I mean, Pulp Fiction, Grease, Saturday Night Fever, like this guy is such an icon. He's, been in so many eras and so many generations. He's been like, had a role that was so iconic, in the disco era, and, playing Vinnie Barbarino in Grease, and playing like, obviously in Pulp Fiction and all the other movies. So, I didn't punish him, but I just kind of, at some point I waited for the right time, and I went up and I was like, hey man, just wanted to say hi, and got my picture taken with him. It was a super cool guy.
That rules awesome. It. It's so rad. Yeah. No, I've definitely met people like that. Like, I don't think you want to talk to me, but let me just get a picture real quick. Just let me shake your hand and get a picture.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know this is kind of a humble brag, maybe not so humble, but like with Paul McCartney, I didn't try to meet him. I was literally just trying to get a beer, and I was in New York City at this like Super Bowl pre-party that the Foo Fighters were playing, and I was going out there to DJ for this weird like CBGB's related Amnesty International event that was happening, and I was like way low on the totem pole. Like I was like the guy that DJ'd first, and then by the end of the night, like Madonna and Yoko Ono and all these big people were playing and presenting, and my friend just kind of got me on it. And it gave me an excuse to have a paid trip to New York. And so then I found out the Foos were going to be playing this Super Bowl party because the Super Bowl was in New York that year. And I just like flew in a day early. And it's kind of a funny story where like, in order to get the flight a day early, you change your flight. And then of course there's like no seats left. So I had like the worst, in order to make it possible and get there in time, I had to sit in like probably the worst seat possible on a plane. So literally the middle seat of the back row up against like the lavatory. So like it doesn't recline because you're up against, and you know, like the back is all like where it's the most choppy on an airplane. And like you always have just like the line of people there waiting to use the bathroom. And it's just kind of like gross and you can't recline. And you're just like, there was like two fat people on either side of me. And I was just in the middle seat, just like, God, this is the longest flight from California all the way to New York, like 6 hours just. And then like, so I went from that, like literally like the worst possible seat you could possibly have on an airplane to like my friend picking me up at the airport, cruising to this gig. And then we get into like the little like backstage VIP sort of reception that they had, you know, for like the friends and family of the band. And it was like sponsored by Bud Light. So there was like free beer, but you could only get Bud Light. So everyone was like just waiting in line at the bar to get their free beers. And I get my beer finally. And then I like it was really crowded. And I turn around and I'm just face to face with Paul McCartney. And Paul McCartney's hanging out with his buddy, which is John McEnroe, the like tennis star. And I'm like, dude, this is what I'm like, literally like, I probably still smell like an airplane lavatory. Like I literally like 45 minutes ago, I was on the worst seat of an airplane. And right now I'm face to face with Paul McCartney with an ice cold Bud Light in my hand. And I just like, it was like, I don't know, man. I don't know how to explain this. Have you ever like come face to face with like a girl who's just like so drop dead gorgeous that like you say something like really stupid, like you just kind of get like a mush mouth. You're just like, oh, hi, you know, and then you're like, God, I'm such a loser. Why did I say that? You know, but like, it was so weird. It was so surreal to just be like face to face with Paul McCartney. And I just was like, he's looking at me and I'm looking at him and I'm just like, put my hand out. I'm like, dude, thank you. You know, I'm like, thanks for being Paul McCartney. I didn't know what to say. And I kind of just expected the like, hey, I just wanted to like do the quick, like, just, you know, hey man, I just wanted to say you're rad. And he was so cool that he was just super like calm and like zen. He's just like, all right, mate. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Wow. So where are you from? And he was just like chatty. We like ended up talking for like 5 minutes.
Oh, really?
Like, you could probably just sense that, like, I mean, his whole life, he's probably encountered people like me that are going to be nervous to meet him.
Oh, yeah.
And so he had this really disarming kind of like way of just like making the, you know, calming the situation down and then just being super cool. He was just super humble and down to earth and kind and like kind of just let me have my little, you know, it's like, he's like, I'm just going to let this weird musician kid and have his time with Paul McCartney because he's probably going to be talking about this for the rest of his life. And here I am talking about it for the rest of my life.
But I appreciate the ones who know that, who it's like, I mean, maybe it didn't mean anything to him, but he does actually know that it means that 5 minutes means all eternity for you. So it's like, I appreciate that he can appreciate that. You know what I mean?
Really cool. And like I said before, it's like these older musicians that you meet that, you know, that came before you, they show you the way and you're like, dude, I want to be like that when I grow up, man. I want to be like that. If anyone ever comes up to me and is like, dude, Sugarcult meant something to me, I'm going to give them the time. You know, I'm not going to blow them off. I never did, you know, and it's just, it's awesome. You know, it's like, I don't know. I've said this so many times, but like one of my friends, when we first started to become like, you know, successful as a band and started to get really busy and do, you know, we're like doing one thing after another. He gave me this one great nugget of advice. He's like, just always remember, you get to do this. You don't have to do this. He's like, this is such an amazing, like, it's, you don't get to do this because you're so great. It's like, you kind of won the lottery that anyone cares about your band or wants to listen to your record, or that you even got to make a record. So like, just keep yourself calibrated and remember that this is like, it's not like an entitlement, like just because you have a record and a song on the radio that now, you know, of course you get to do all this, just to keep that sort of appreciation that like you get to do this, you know? So when you say like, oh, I have to go to Europe and play some festivals, like rephrase that as I get to go to Europe and play some festivals. Like I realize that a lot of musicians would kill to be able to do what we're doing right now. And we need to keep that in perspective and appreciate it. And really like every time you go into the studio, you get to make a record. You don't have to make a record. When you go on tour, you get to go on tour. You don't have to go on tour. You get to play a show tonight. You don't have to play that show. And if you keep that attitude, I think you make better records, first of all. I think you play better shows, and I think you have a better time because you don't feel like entitled to it. You feel like, wow, this is like this incredible opportunity, and I'm going to make the most of it every chance I get, you know?
I like that. No, and I think that is a good, I mean, obviously I'm not in your shoes, but that seems like the best way to kind of take that. And as a fan, I like it because, like, yeah, you're welcoming, you like talking about the stuff. It's not like, oh, Buzz, like, fuck off. That's something I did 20 years ago kind of thing. It's like, you know.
Yeah. I mean, you know, dude, it's like to have done something 20 years ago is awesome. You know, I know lots of people. I was just hanging out with some people that I went to high school with in my hometown like a couple weeks ago. And like lots of those people are just like 20 years ago, they didn't do anything. It's like they don't have anything to celebrate the 20th anniversary. It's cool to have things you did that you can celebrate the 20th anniversary of. I hope I'm making things today that I'll be celebrating the 20th anniversary of. You know what I mean? I mean, but that's the thing. It's not just people in bands. You and me and everyone listening to this have in common that we're like alive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's cool. You know, you don't have to do this. You get to do this, you know? And so like, again, it's like, who cares if you got a record deal or if you get to be famous or you get to play a show or whatever, you get to be on this giant rock flying in space. You know what I mean? And that's pretty rad. You know, like
I
you
love
can
the
literally
appreciation of it. You do, you
dude,
appreciate
you can like save up some money and go on a plane and be in anywhere on earth because you live in a time where air travel is possible. That's insane. If someone like 1,000 years ago would have been, I mean, the fact that we're even having this conversation right now through this like computer,
like two different coasts. We're on two different coasts.
I know, like that's just bananas. You know what I mean? So, you know, I guess, yeah, it's a trip. You put it all in perspective like that. Man, yeah. So 20 years ago, Palm Trees and Power Lines, and it was a really important year for Sugarcult because it was our second record. And actually, like, well, it's about to be the summer now because June. And 20 years ago this summer, we went on the Warped Tour. And I think it was the Warped Tour's, might have been the 10-year anniversary Warped Tour run. 2004 Warped Tour. I think it was their 10-year anniversary because I think they technically started in 1994.
That sounds like right to me. If I'm doing my punk rock math right, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So we got to go on the Warped Tour, and we had been on the Warped Tour twice before. We went on right before our first record, Start Static. We went on the Warped Tour in 2001, and that was basically our like handshake with the world. It was when most people learned about Sugarcult because we kind of never really toured, you know, outside of California. So we went on the Warped Tour 2001. We were playing like the tiny little stage. And then we did the Warped Tour 2002. And again, we were kind of on the side stage, you know, playing, you know, and then by the Warped Tour 2004, which, you know, Palm Trees and Power Lines came out in late April of 2004. And we left on the Warped Tour in June. So we had this kind of fresh record. And the song Memory was our single. And that had kind of been doing really well on like the radio and MTV. So at that point, we got to go on the Warped Tour and like be one of the bands that got to play what they call the main stage, you know? So we were up there with kind of like, for us, we were like, wow, we're finally like at the, like, you know, we feel like we started the Warped Tour as freshmen and now we're at the Warped Tour as seniors. Like we're up there with like Bad Religion and NoFX and all the, you know, all the upperclassmen. And it felt so cool. You know, it felt so, I mean, honestly, that we felt like that was it. Like we got to the top of the thing and rang the bell. Like we got to be the main stage band on the Warped Tour and we have a song on the radio. And then it turned out to just be the beginning because about a week into the Warped Tour, we get a call from our manager saying that, you know, not to get our hopes up, but that we were actually on the short list for Green Day because they were about to put out another record and start another tour. And that record would end up being American Idiot.
Oh, no. That's how I got into Green Day.
Which was 20 years ago, So right now, Green Day's out doing a tour to celebrate 20 years of American Idiot and 30 years of Dookie, which was their commercial breakthrough, which actually my band before Sugarcult, Popsico, we got to open for them the week that Dookie came out. We were the local band in Santa Barbara that got to open for them. And I was still a teenager, but it was like, how cool is that?
Dude, that's rock and roll history. Like, that's a piece of the fact.
Dude, I'm like Forrest Gump of rock and roll history. Like, I was like there with Green Day, and then like 10 years later, my other band, gets to open for them on their American Idiot tour. And you know what? I should call them right now and see if I can I should be opening for them now. For the 30th anniversary. I should be doing like a DJ set or something.
It only makes sense.
Can I come out and like jump out of a cake or something, man? Like, but like, yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy. It's just wild how fast time flies by. So 20 years ago, we put out Palm Trees. We did the Warped Tour. Then we got the call. And I remember the Warped Tour. We were like, we were on the phone with our manager like every day, just like, dude, did we get the tour? Did we get the tour? He's like, stop asking. It's like being a little kid saying, are we there yet? Like, are we there yet, Mom? Are we there yet? Our manager's like, shut up. You're going to jinx it. And we were like, who are the other bands we're competing with? And they're like, we're not going to tell you, because, I was like, dude, I'm going to find them on the Warped Tour and like take the air out of their tire or something that, sabotage them. We want to get this gig. And maybe about halfway through the tour, we finally get the call and they're like, all right, dude, you guys are going out like this fall and winter or whatever with Green Day. You got the tour.
Nice.
We did all of America doing the American Idiot tour. And then on that tour, the band, we got along with a band and it was, it felt like it was a good fit. And they ended up asking us if we would go with them to Japan. We ended up going with them to Japan on the American Idiot tour in Japan, like shortly thereafter in the spring of 2005. And so it was just, Palm Trees and Power Lines was a really wild chapter for Sugarcult. And you can actually, you could probably find it for free online if you just Google around. And I think there's probably still some copies if you look on if you look on Discogs or something like that, or Amazon or whatever. But we put out a DVD. We actually made like a documentary film that we started shooting around the time of Palm Trees and Power Lines. We brought this guy along with us, and he just kind of turned on the camera. And I told him, like, don't like have us ham it up, just like sort of like be a fly on the wall and shoot some footage. And all these interesting things started happening because I was really influenced by that Wilco movie, which was called I Am Trying to Break Your Heart, that great director Sam Jones did. And I was like, I want that, where like you just turn a camera on and follow a band around and document what happens naturally. I don't want it to be this like goofy like pop punk with us doing all these like jackass stunts. I just want it to be like getting to know us as people and like filming us, and it's like a coin toss. It's like it's either going to be really boring or it's going to be really exciting. And it turned out to be really cool. It was a really dynamic time for us. And we had this guy with us. So you can actually watch this documentary film. It's called Back to the Disaster. And our label released it in a really kind of jivey way where they like
a CD, right?
It looks like a CD.
I have a copy.
It's packaged with like a live EP. So people think it's a live EP with like, oh yeah, a DVD as bonus footage, but it's actually like the way we intended it was to be a documentary movie. And then the live EP was sort of the bonus. So because it's packaged like a CD, it's a little bit confusing to people, but just look past that, get it, pop it in. It's feature length, and it's and again, you can find it for free on like if you look on the internet, it's out there somewhere. DM me on Instagram and I can send you a link. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to watch as we're talking about this because it basically kind of captures us because there was a lot of highs. There was a lot of high highs and a lot of low lows during the chapter of Palm Trees and Power Lines. We had our biggest hit, which was the song Memory. That was probably our biggest hit. Before that, the biggest hit was Bouncing Off the Walls. And then Memory kind of got even bigger. And so we had a song a lot of people know you know, that was on that record. It was actually the first song we wrote for Palm Trees and Power Lines.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it ended up being the biggest song on the record. I think we only released 2 singles off that record. The second single was a song called She's the Blade,
One of
and
my
we actually shot the video for that during the Warped Tour 2004. We were in Brooklyn, and we went and spent a whole day, like on a day off, and shot it with these really interesting guys. And it's cool. You should look it up look it up on the internet. It's like a lot of green screen kind of stuff, and then they like built all this stuff afterwards, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, it was an interesting record to make, and it just opened up a lot of new things for us. It kind of turned us from like the sort of consummate opening band into like the band that we could go out and like headline our own tours, and it was a really cool chapter.
Well, that's kind of interesting what you're talking about right there too, because with Start Static, I feel like that was probably the start of things. Like, not obviously you guys were a band before that, you had releases, but like we were talking about earlier, where it was kind of like the debut. You got stuff before it, but there's the beginning. You know, I know you got to work with Matt Wallace and stuff, so you got to do the studio and all that. But do you feel like in some ways that Palm Trees is like where the band really did kind of, I don't know if dignified's the word, but like where like you're saying, it's like, wow, we really are a band, or we can really do so. Like this is going to be something that we can keep this going. This isn't just a band we're going to do for a couple years and dissolve out. I mean, did you kind of feel that on this record?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of bands will tell you the sort of cliche that you have your whole life to make your first record, and then you have like a couple years to make your second record. And, you know, we were like a local band from Santa Barbara, California, playing around, you know, in the late 90s. And we got a record deal in the beginning of 2001, put out Start Static, which was, you know, the 11 songs that were like the best of probably a batch of about 44 songs that we had total from when we had started the band. And we narrowed it down to like, okay, what's the 11 songs that really is, you know, they're going to form a nice body of work and kind of introduce our band to the world. But we really didn't know how we were going to be received or perceived or anything. It was just kind of like, we're this band and we're just kind of doing our thing. And then the world kind of, you know, with Start Static, the world kind of embraced us, and specifically the world of like the Warped Tour and like the sort of nascent like pop punk and emo scenes that were popping up in the early 2000s. We kind of got, you know, I feel like we were out on this like random like raft out there in the ocean, and we didn't really know where we belonged. And these guys kind of like threw us a rope and said, pull yourselves on board. And we were like, okay. And it was like, what's this? Oh, it's the Warped Tour, you know? And we kind of got taken in by that scene and adopted by it in a weird way. But we, you know, we were always a little bit reluctant to, you know, to kind of, you know, I always use the Groucho Marx, Woody Allen saying that says, I would never want to be part of any club that would have me as a member. Like we were reluctant about being put into the box of being a band from this movement. You know, I think we were appreciative about the fact that there was a movement that was accepting us, but we were also a little bit hesitant. And, you know, we're like, I don't know, man. Is this a movement or is this a trend? And I don't want to go down with the ship, you know?
Yeah.
I like that we were always kind of a little bit like outsiders and outcasts, you know? So we made a real effort. We had to make a real effort to like, we had to make a real effort to sort of keep our, you know, keep our identity and stay our course. And resist, like I said before, like resist the temptation to just sort of like conform to like, oh, this is how everybody else is in this scene, so let's be like that. And so we kind of, I felt like we did it in a way that I can be proud of, where we were like, we participated and we toured with a lot of the bands in that scene, and we participated in like the Warped Tour and all that kind of stuff, but not at the expense of our own kind of our own identity as a band. We kind of stayed true to what our own little vision that we had for whatever, for better or for worse,
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. So like, yeah, so with Start Static, it was like that. And because we didn't really know what it was going to be like, it was really kind of like a crapshoot. Like, okay, we're going to put this record out and I don't know what's going to happen. And then started to work out. And so it gave us a lot of confidence in our vision. We were like, okay, cool. Maybe we are onto something here. Let's keep on going. Let's kind of double down on what we're going for now. And let's do it like a little bit. Let's dig a little deeper and go a little harder and like be a little less apologetic and just kind of own what we're doing here. And Tim got a little bit more like willing to be a little bit more like to dig a little deeper and sing about stuff that was a little more like vulnerable yeah. So I feel like it's a more mature, it's definitely like an honest snapshot of where we were as people and where we were as musicians and where we were as a band. And the other thing that needs to be said is it was also like I said, there was a lot of drama and high highs and low lows. It was also, during the making of that record, when we first started writing it, we were in Hollywood, right by Hollywood Forever Cemetery, actually, at a place called Studio 9, like literally walking distance from Hollywood Forever Cemetery, right there on Santa Monica, a place called Studio 9. And we'd rented out and we were getting together every day and writing. And during that time period, like our original drummer, Ben Davis, was like, he wasn't really showing up to the things. And we had some drama with him during the end of Start Static's era where his drinking was getting a little bit out of control. So like we were going through this transition where Ben wasn't really showing up. And before that, like I said, before we started making the record, we had been playing some shows and we, long story short, and this is all actually covered in that documentary that we were talking about. We basically gave him an ultimatum. We were like, you've got to get sober or we're going to like, send you home and get another drummer. And so we eventually did kind of an intervention. We sent Ben to rehab for a month. And we flew out this guy to sort of temporarily replace him, this guy that we knew from a band called Lefty. And it was this guy named Kenny Livingston. And we just hit it off with Kenny. He was just such a cool dude and such a great drummer. And we just it was just like, sometimes you just change the chemistry of a group dynamic. It changes, people got along better and it just felt, more relaxing. And then we had this, so we almost had this weird thing where like, then eventually Ben came back and, he got straight for a while and it was okay. And, but then during the making of Palm Trees, he just wasn't really showing up. And eventually we just started kind of calling Kenny. We're like, well, like I'd get there and Tim would be jamming with Kenny. And I'm like, what, are we making this record with Kenny? Because we just needed someone to play drums and Ben wasn't showing up. So we had to have this really like, it was a really like hard decision to make, but it sort of felt like it made itself. The decision kind of made itself where we kind of decided that like maybe this was a good time to kind of like separate ourselves from Ben because we were in the process of making a record. We're like, this seems like it's going to probably be inevitable and it'd be better to do this now before we make another record rather than like wait to make the record and then have this big, and so we had to do that. And that was hard. It was really hard for Tim because, Tim and Ben were the ones who started Sugarcult. Like Tim was like this kid who had written some songs and Ben was this guy who had a recording studio. And I think Ben hadn't played drums in a few years, but Tim ran out of money to pay Ben to record his songs, to demo his songs. So he paid Ben by giving him Tim started out on drums. So Tim took his drum kit from when he was like in high school and gave it to Ben as like payment for demoing him. And then Ben ended up playing like, I don't know the whole story, but I think Ben played drums on some of the demos and maybe played bass. Ben's this incredible musician, all around musician. And then they just, from that relationship, they started to play together. And then eventually like another guy they were going to school with was Aaron, our bass player. And they got him in And then they started doing some things as a trio. And that's like, I met them shortly thereafter because I was part of the local music scene. And we hit it off. And I was actually, I think I told you this last time, because like in Popsicle, I played bass. So I had been a bass player. And then since they already had Aaron, they didn't need a bass player. And me and Tim just became really good friends. And then one day he asked me if I would want to play guitar. And I was like, I just kind of jumped on it because it seemed like fun. I was like, oh, that sounds like fun to play guitar. I mean, I sort of played guitar, but I wasn't like, I didn't really identify myself as like a guitarist, lead guitarist. And so we just kind of went for it. And I had no idea that things were going to turn out the way they turned out. Like, I just thought I was jamming with some kids and just, having some fun and trying to figure out what was going to happen next, and then, we all just sort of fed off each other and it became this big band. So Ben was a very like important part of Sugarcult. So to leave him during Palm Trees and Power Lines was really like, it was like a real, like, it was like a divorce. It was like this big, like, family, like mom and dad. Tim and Ben were mom and dad, and to have a new drummer, it's like getting, the analogies I could say is like divorce or like, getting a organ transplant. You know what I mean? It's like, is the new drummer going to take? It's like someone gets like a new liver or something. It's like, Can you find the new liver? Will the liver take? And so we ended up getting Kenny during Palm Trees, and we made the record with him. And I feel like, it brought us to a different level. I mean, Kenny was he's a very different drummer than Ben. But he's a really like hard hitting drummer, so like, I feel like our band became a little heavier. And honestly, like, if you listen to the whole trilogy, if you listen to Start Static and then listen to Palm Trees, which is what we're talking about, and then you listen to the record we would make, a few years later called Lights Out, which ended up kind of being our last record. You sort of, I feel like they all kind of, it's very Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. Like, it's got this, like, they all make sense when you check them all out as a body of work. One informs the next one. And then when you listen to the later one, you go back and listen to the previous one, and you see things, you see like clues that were planted that would make sense. Like, there's certain songs on Start Static that you might not have understood, like Lost in You or I Changed My Name. But then you listen to Palm Trees and it makes Head Up and Worst December and Counting Stars and Sign Off. Like, it explains why those are there, and then if you go and listen to Lights Out, you'll listen to things like, Perfect, or, I can't remember the names of some of the songs on the record, but like, and it's like all the songs are kind of relatives of each other. That each record has its own identity, but they're definitely all siblings,
It's funny you said that, because I actually had those as questions. I was like, were there songs, do you feel like, on Palm Trees and Power Lines that were inklings of what was going to come for like Lights Out? So you actually just answered a question I had for you, basically.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you can do that by design. I think it just starts to happen. You start to kind of go, I guess this is like, you start to, I don't like to say you become redundant, but like, you start to kind of go, well, I guess this is our style. This is like what we do, and then you kind of write songs like in that spirit, and I think a band finds its voice after making a record or two. You kind of go like, oh, this is kind of who we are. Even if you go back and listen to like the songs on Wrap Me Up in Plastic, like our collection of demos that predate Start Static, you see clues of, things we were reaching for that we just didn't have the flexibility and maturity and musicianship yet to actually like, manifest into, like you think things we were reaching for that we weren't ready to get, and so it's kind of fun. I mean, that's just as a music fan, regardless of Sugarcult, I think that's fun to do with any bands you like. It's like, you listen to like their sort of like core records that you love, and then you kind of go back and do that deep dive and go like, oh, okay, this was like they were planting the seeds that eventually grew to, to what they became. And then to listen to stuff in the aftermath, you can kind of appreciate it in a different way too. I don't know. I'm kind of a nerd that way, but like, I think it's fun to do that with all art, even like, I mean, it's fun to go see the early works of Picasso and then see his like famous works, and then see his like works that he did later in life, and it all starts to make sense. You're like, oh, this is how he started, and then he departed from that and he started doing this, and then towards the end he, you know, it's like it's kind of fun. You can do it with all forms of art. And you know, whether it's a, you know, TV series you like and you're like, dude, season 1 and then season 2 or whatever, and then they jump the shark, but like, you know what I mean? It's just kind of fun to geek out on this kind of stuff.
Oh,
You
I
know?
love it. No, the
Yeah.
comparing and contrasting, like
Yeah.
seeing where it starts and seeing where it ends kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about, I was interested in a couple of people when I said I was having you on, kind of wanted the question too, like for Palm Trees, like what did your guitar rig kind of look like recording it? I mean, did you use a lot of different guitars and amps? Did you basically use the same thing? Like I kind of get different answers for this when talking about albums. Sometimes you use kind of the same thing, old trusty rig the entire record through. Sometimes
I
you're
mean,
changing it up for every song.
when we got our record deal in February of 2001, we gave each guy in the band got a couple $1,000s out of the recording budget to go like upgrade our gear, because we had pretty like primitive gear. And I bought this Bogner Shiva. It's a Bogner amp, which Bogner is this guy, this German guy who would like used to work for Marshall, I think, and he started his own sort of boutique amp company called Bogner. And I went and tried one out at their little place that they had in the Valley, and it was really cool. And I mean, it was one of those things where it was like super expensive, but he was able to give me like an artist deal where I got it for like half off. So I got like a, you know, I probably got like a $6,000 amp for like a little over $2,000. And I used that on Start Static. And then I pretty much used it every show we ever played, on every tour we did, unless we were like flying somewhere and using a backline. And I'm pretty sure that's the one I used on everything else we did. I'm pretty sure I used that on Palm Trees. On, you know, I mean, there might have been a few songs where we plugged me into different amps, but that was kind of my primary thing. It wasn't. I've just never been like a gear head, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just like to keep things simple. I'm like, I just want to plug into this thing that sounds good and play a guitar that stays in tune, you know, and maybe, you know, some pedals. But like, I don't know. I don't want to say I'm lazy about it, but I'm just not one of those people that's like, you know, I'm definitely like not the guitar player guy who's like, oh, dude, what I need for this is like a blah, 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 blah. I'm like, dude, it's too much of a hassle. Just use this one. It's close enough for rock and roll, you know?
I feel the same. I play guitar
Yeah.
the same way. Less is more. I don't want a pedal board. I don't want 15 pedals.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just sort of scared of all that stuff. It's like, I don't understand. It's too many bells and whistles. It just makes me like, you know, it just kind of becomes like analysis paralysis. So I just like, you know, my pedal board was pretty simple all the way through Sugarcult. I had like a Boss delay pedal. And then eventually I got one of those green line 6 delays where, cause I like to be able to like control the timing of it. And it was like modeler delay things. And then I always had a wah, and I always had the orange MXR phase 90. So like on Pretty Girl, for example, that weird sound that like on our first album, Pretty Girl, you know, like the like that's basically just a MXR phase 90 just dimed, like turned all the way up, and maybe a wah like half cocked and left alone, and then probably a delay. So it's pretty simple, you know, but it just sounds cool, you know. And then yeah, I don't think I had a tuner. I think I had a chorus pedal at one point too, that I used on like songs like Los Angeles and like, yeah, it was pretty simple. I didn't have a really big pedal board, you know, I kind of just had the bare minimum I could get away with to pull it off. And in Bogner Shiva, you know, amp, which is just, you know, one speaker. And then when we did the Green Day tour, Bogner gave me another one. So I had like a double. So I had like 2 on stage, because we were like, nice. You know, we're going to be playing in big like arenas. I wanted to like look more cool. But I think I had them both plugged in, but one was kind of a backup in case the other one didn't work. But so that was that. While we're making Palm Trees, that was pretty much it. I will say one fun story. We were making the record at a small studio called Full Kilt in Burbank. Actually, it was like North Hollywood kind of. And it was right behind this like really iconic liquor store called Circus Liquors, where it's like this big clown like sign that
Oh,
you
I've
see.
seen that sign.
Yeah, and we actually took a picture of that and then put it in the inner artwork of the Palm Trees and Power Lines artwork. But we were like right around the corner from that in this weird little alley. And that's kind of how we got the name of the record. I was in the back. I think someone might have been smoking a cigarette. Maybe our producer was smoking a cigarette or something. And I was back there and I was just yip yapping as I do. And I think our manager and maybe Tim heard me say something and they went and wrote it down because they thought it was cool. Because I was like pointing out we were in this little grimy alley in North Hollywood, and I was kind of pointing out the horizon. I was like, look, man, it's just like you got the Circus Liquor sign, and then it's just like palm trees and power lines as far as the eye can see, because that's what you see in LA. It's like palm trees everywhere, and then power lines that are like, phone lines or whatever. And they were like, well, I like the way palm trees and power lines sounds.
It does
And
roll
it
off the
ended up
tongue
being
really
kind of
well.
the right, it ended up being the right thing for the record, because there was this as we were coming up with the songs and working on the lyrics, these weird like themes started emerging, where it was like most of these songs are about there's a breakup Tim went through, and then there was a lot of like we had been this local band for 2.5 years, and then we just like went on tour for Start Static, and we never really looked back. We toured for about 4 years because we 3 years, because we left on tour for Start Static. And then while we were on tour with Start Static, about 2 years into it, our record got re-released in Japan and Europe. Like Epitaph put it out in Europe, and then this other label put it out in Japan. And it became a hit over there, like 2 years after it was a hit over here.
Oh,
and
really?
So we were like living this weird life where we were like we were in the studio writing and recording Palm Trees, but then we would take a break and fly to Japan and like play a big festival and like do a bunch of press. But we were talking it was all about like our brand new record, Start Static, which to us was already like 3 years old. And we were like deep into making Palm Trees and Power Lines. So we had this really weird thing. We were like flying over to Japan and Europe, playing shows to promote Start Static, which was new to them, and then coming home and working on Palm Trees. But the thing about that, now that I'm talking about it, it reminds me, the thing about that was kind of cool was it gave us a chance to like sneak a few of our new songs into our set in front of like a receptive crowd. So people would be like hearing Bouncing Off the Walls and Stuck in America and Pretty Girl. And then we'd like play Memory. So we were sort of able to like test market, like, hey, that song like seemed like people really liked it, and then we'd kind of go home and like, we played it a little faster than we were going to record it. And we're like, oh, see how when we play it faster, people really enjoyed it. So we kind of gave us a chance to sort of workshop some of the songs for Palm Trees in front of some, foreign audiences. So that was kind of an interesting part of the Palm Tree story that I always forget to include, is that while we were making that record, we were still promoting Start Static in foreign countries. So we were living this kind of double life of like going over there and playing shows and then coming back and like, working on a record. But we were in this studio called Full Kilt. This producer was Gavin McKillop. He had produced, he was a Scottish guy, and he'd produced like the Goo Goo Dolls and Toad the Wet Sprocket and Nick Cave. And his first big break was when he was a kid was General Public Tenderness, like in the 80s, like it was like the band that the guys from the English Beat started in the early 80s. And so he was this older guy from Scotland. You could barely understand what he was saying because his accent was pretty thick. And but it was kind of just cool working with him because he didn't know anything about pop punk or emo or the Warped Tour. He just knew about music, and he just saw something in us, and he's just like, and which was great for us because we didn't, like I said, we just wanted to make a timeless record. We didn't want to make like a great pop punk record,
Yeah.
Even though everyone was calling us that, we were like, well, I don't want to, I don't want to like limit ourselves to the sort of tropes of a genre. I just want to be a good rock and roll band. And, to me, like our band, like I don't think we ever even came near to achieving this, but I always saw our band more as like something like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, where you're just like, there's a good rock and roll band. You don't think of them as like a new wave band or a pop or a power pop band or a classic rock band. You just think of them as a band that has a bunch of great songs and sounds cool, and like you put it on today and it's going to sound great. You put it on 10 years ago, it's going to sound great. You put it on 10 years from now, it's going to sound awesome. Just want to make that like durable kind of blue jeans and Converse record that's just never gonna expire or seem like, like it was ever in or out of style. So we were making the record, and Gavin did something with me that I thought was really clever. He told me to, like, we were tracking Memory, and it was time for me to do my guitar solo. And he was like, hey dude, just play something right now while I'm trying to get some sounds. And I was just chilling out. I was drinking a glass of wine or something. And I was like, all right, cool. How about this? And he's like, that's cool. And play a little bit more. Oh, cool. I'm going to do it with like, now try it. Let me see what it sounds like with the pedals. Okay, cool. He's like, right on. Just here. Sorry, dude. I'm having trouble. I got to go change the microphone. Can you try it a couple more times? And I was just doing it. And then he was like, all right, cool. And I'm like, all right, cool. So let's do it. He's like, I already did it. He tricked me. He basically like made me think I was just getting like, he was just trying to get sound. So I needed to play something. And he's like, I've figured out with you that I get good performances out of you when you think you're not being recorded for reals. And then as soon as you become recording for reals, you stiffen up and you play it like too safe, and you don't do all the cool stuff that has swagger and soul. And so he basically like, yeah, he tricked me. So if you listen to the solo on Memory, it's me thinking that I'm just horsing around. You know what I mean? And like,
it's so rad.
Yeah. And I was like, oh man, well played. Okay, cool. Yeah.
That's rad. That is, I mean, that kudos to him. I feel like that's like, those are those examples where like, that's what a producer does. Like, that's what somebody, like when people talk about like what a music producer does, he does something like that.
Yeah. They have to learn each person. They have to learn each person in the band's personalities and they're like, assets and liabilities and like, everything. And it's a lot of the game of being a producer is kind of being like a psychiatrist or something like that. You have to kind of like, coax performances out of people. Imagine it's similar to being a director at a movie when you're working on a movie, or a publisher when someone's writing a book. It's like, it's your job to pull the best performances out of people, to push them when you think that they can do better, and then also to be sort of the like one who can leave well enough alone, the one who can just be like, look, dude, let's not overdo this, because if we overdo it, it's going to take away the magic. It's a real art to be a producer.
Oh no, it is. It's a talent in itself. I've interviewed enough producers where I go, no, that's a producer. Like, you talk to them, you go, you're a producer. You're not just a musician who like records other bands. Like, you are by definition, at least in my eyes, yes, a record.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at like Rick Rubin, for example. It's like, he's very legendary he's made so many great records, and he doesn't really get his hands on the equipment too much. He doesn't really, he's mostly just kind of pacing around the room, and just his presence and occasionally the things he says just inspire people to do better.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah.
No, definitely.
What other I feel like I'm talking way too much, as I usually do, but what else do people want to know about Palm Trees?
Like, how about like writing in studio? Was most of this written before hitting the studio, or was the album written a little bit in studio? Like, by the time it came to record, like once you got there, were the songs all pretty fleshed out, or were you still kind of tweaking?
Yeah, we fleshed out the majority of it before we went in the studio. I think there was 2 songs that kind of came to life in the studio. Is there a song on the record called Over, or am I getting that mixed up with our other record?
I think you're right. I want to say Over is on like side B.
Yeah. So the song Over was something we hadn't worked out ahead of time. And that sort of came together. Like, Tim started like working on something, and then we're like, oh, that song ended up on Palm Trees. And then there was another song, like the song Sign Off, where literally Tim just disappeared. There was at Full Kilt at the studio where we were working. There was like this tiny little sort of like side room where like some other assistant engineer would be in there, like working on some other project. So it was kind of a little like C room in there. And he just kind of disappeared in there one afternoon while we were all working on something else. and we're like, what the hell's Tim, you know? And then he comes out and he's like, hey guys, check this out. And he basically like wrote and recorded Sign Off, like pretty much by himself, you know? Yeah. Which was, I think is that the last song on the record?
I think so.
You should probably know this. Yeah.
I've been listening to a lot, anticipating this, but it's one of those things where you're like listening on your phone, you're not looking at the names of the songs. So it's like when I try to think of track lists now,
it's like so really mellow, kind of haunting, sort of like acoustic song at the very end of the record. Yeah, it was like Tim had a lot of like issues and you know, mental health issues and stuff like that. And I think that was like a song that kind of like, you know, it was like, whoa, dude, that's pretty hardcore that you want to like go there. And he's like, yeah, I think so, you know? So it's an interesting, it's a weird record because there's so many themes going on. It was like a lot of like being a band that's away from home and like the sort of cliche of like, you know, it's like people who live in a space station, or, you know, it's like you've been away from normal life for so long that normal life, quote unquote, normal life doesn't feel normal anymore. You come home and you're like an alien to your friends because they've just been living a normal civilian life. I guess that people who've been in the military can probably relate to this. Although, you know, I'm not going to equate being in the military with being in a rock and roll band, but the thing they do have in common is you're leaving civilian life and you're going into this intense environment that's not something most people ever experience in their life, ever. And you get acclimated to it. So like when you're in a band, obviously you don't have people, you know, shooting at you and you're not like risking your life every day, but you're at the same time, you're like every night is Saturday night. You're playing shows every night. You're doing all these things all the time. You're in a different city every night. You're constantly adapting to different environments and, you know, sleeping in a different bed and you're on the road all the time. And so it does give you this sort of weird, like Radiohead's record called The Bends, I think, addresses that, which is their sophomore record. And The Bends is like what happens for deep sea divers. Like if you don't regulate how quickly you come up or go down, you can like get what's called the bends. And then of course, Elton John has Rocket Man. David Bowie has, you know, Major Tom, whatever that song is, you know, like it's just like all these songs have been written in the past about the sort of feeling, the sort of alien feeling you get when you remove yourself from just being you know, one day you're just a kid from Santa Barbara who's like living in the same place and hanging out with your friends and working at the record store and just playing some shows here and there, to all of a sudden you're gone for 3 years, like nonstop touring all over the world. And you come home and everyone's kind of gone on with their lives. And like, just even standing in line at like Trader Joe's feels weird. Like you're used to having like a dressing room that already has food in it and already has beer in it. And like, you're going home and you have to go grocery shopping, you know? And it's not like, I'm not saying that like in a, you know, obnoxious way where it's like, oh man, I need my tour manager to tell me where I need to go. But like, it's weird. It's a hard adjustment to come back to normal life and you're not living out of a suitcase. So there's a lot of that addressed in Palm Trees and Power Lines, where it's that sort of weird transition where you sort of just like become this alien, this kind of rock and roll alien. And then you try to come home and it's really weird. It's just, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just really weird. And then of course that takes its toll on relationships. And Tim, you know, in the process of being gone, he had a serious girlfriend, and then she eventually, they separated. So there's a lot of songs on the record that deal with that. There was another girl that entered the picture that, you know, again, I think he was reluctant to get in another relationship because he knew it was kind of inevitable that, you know, it wasn't going to work because he'd be on tour again, you know. And that's what the song Memory is kind of about. It's about this other girl that he kind of got a crush on. And she's actually like a pretty famous like film director now, so I won't say her name, but like, you know, the idea of like, you know, what's the point of doing this when we already know it's like destined to fail because I'm going to be on tour all the time, you know? And then it's just we're just like, I'm not going to willingly get myself into something where now I'm going to just be like, disappointing a person or bumming myself out. And then again, that plants the seeds for Lights Out, which is a record that we made after Palm Trees, where at that point I think Tim had just surrendered to like, okay, I'm a rock and roll star who's going to be gone all the time. So at this point, I'm going to find love a la carte, one night at a time, one night stand at a time, and just be that guy. And he did a really good job doing that for a while. But then, the end of that is, oh man, turns out that's not all it's cracked up to be either, because then you feel really hollow and empty and shallow. And like, there's more to a relationship than just, a one night stand. There's something to be said for having more of a human connection and developing. And so, I think that's what the next record we have, Lights Out, kind of addresses that kind of transformation from like, rock and roll playboy to sort of realizing like, wait a minute, there's a bigger issue here I got to deal with. And that's maybe why we haven't made a record since. Because eventually he got married and lived happily ever after. The end.
That's still a solid trilogy, though. Those records still a very solid trilogy right there. 100%. Going back to Memory for a second, I mean, obviously that is, I would at least say probably the band's biggest hit. Like, that's such a well-known song. Did you initially think that was going to be like, did it surprise you when it took off? Did you think it would be a different song? Or, I mean, was there any song that you thought on the record, if it was going to go off, it would have been something else? Or was it always kind of like, no, Memory was the obvious, that was always obviously the one that was going to be, the hit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there was something about Memory. Like, I think Memory was one of the Memory and maybe Worst December were like two of the first songs that we wrote for the record. And so that always sort of like the first ones kind of, for whatever reason, like tend to like kind of dictate the trajectory of the record, where you're like, okay, this is kind of, you make one song and then it sort of inspires another song. And then so they all sort of like graft off of each other in a weird way. But I think Memory, like, again, like I said before, it was the time where we were like transitioning from Ben to Kenny, and Kenny really came in and like tweaked Memory in a way that showed us something we didn't see in it. And he kind of suggested some things. I don't remember exactly what they were, but it was like, oh, wow. Like having that outside kind of perspective where someone else from at the time was an outsider come into our little, like, our little bubble and like go, oh, that's cool. Like, I feel like what you're calling the verse to me is the chorus, and what you think is the chorus to me is kind of the verse. And we're like, what? Oh, and like sort of saw Memory in a different way. And I don't know how much it structurally changed because of Kenny, but somehow it just like went to the top of the thing. It was like, whoa, this is a song, like this is something really special here. And it felt like that. And even while we were making the record, I remember like people coming in, like friends coming in, and like people from our record company, and maybe people from just our team, like our manager would come in and stop by and visit. And it seemed like everyone was like, whoa, that's that song. You just sort of felt like there's something about this song that seems kind of special.
It did feel special. It did.
And of course, we chose it as the first single of our record. So, it was like, obviously we kind of like, we kind of thought this is a good song to sort of represent this record. And I don't know. I don't think, I think the hard part was like figuring out what song to follow it. We were like, I don't know, like it was really hard. Like we ended up choosing She's the Blade, and I don't know if that was the right choice or not. I love the song She's the Blade, but there was a lot of other songs on that record that probably could have worked as singles too. There was a lot of diversity on that record. We had like the song What You Say, which was like a little bit more like, garagey. And, then there was a song called Destination Anywhere that was like sort of showed a different side of us. And then there was the song Crying, which was like pretty heavy, there was Worst December. There was a lot of songs that we were kind of tossing around as like other singles, and we couldn't really figure it out, but yeah, there was definitely something about Memory that felt special. And like I said, we got to go overseas and try it out, and people seemed to like it, even though they had never heard it before, because it was like you're testing it out on maybe like a festival crowd, sneaking it in between like Stuck in America and Bouncing Off the Walls, and people are like, into it, so.
I did have off that, actually. I had a listener question, which kind of goes off that, because that's I feel like everybody knows that song, whether you were into, again, I know we talk like pop punk and that, and I know bands like more than that, but like people know that song far beyond it. Like, did Memory chart? Like, was that ever on like the top 40? Like, did that ever chart on the rock charts or top 40 charts?
I'm pretty sure it did. I know Memory and Pretty Girl and Bouncing Off the Walls all charted, but I don't know exactly. But Google.
It's on somewhere.
But it did really, like, I think also you got to think about like on the cultural timeline, like 2004, 2005, that was really when the sort of like pop punk emo kind of craze was like starting to peak, and it was really getting big. This was like, I mean, so many of the bands that we had come up with were like starting to really blow up. Like I said, even Green Day kind of came back from the dead and with American Idiot, so they were relevant again. And Blink-182 was crushing it with like that self-titled record.
Oh, I love
it
that.
had like feeling this and all that. Bands like Good Charlotte were blowing up. Fall Out Boy, like sort of the next wave would have been like I remember the bands on the small stage in 2004, like My Chemical Romance was like on the small stage when we were on the main stage, and like you saw them, and then like a year later they were like blowing up. And like I remember Fall Out Boy asked if they could open for us, and we turned them down twice. And then they blew up like maybe a year or two later, so there was like sort of like this peak of this class that we were part of. And then there was like the freshman class was starting to take the reins, and that would be like bands that opened for us, like the Plain White T's and Yellow Card, would start to like get hits now. And then they weren't the opening band anymore. Like they were like big bands now. And then other bands like My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, little teenage Paramore, a lot of those bands were starting to like, hit their stride. And then they would all subsequently, kind of blow up pretty huge in the next year or two. So like, if you look at the cultural timeline, Memory was right there when like this sort of movement was like really kind of taking, was like really kind of starting to really peak. I wouldn't say it peaked at that point, because I would say it peaked more when like Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance all spilled over and became kind of mainstream, and Panic at the Disco and all that. But it was like climbing the ascent to the peak, and Memory just happened to be sort of the song that ended up, on a lot of people's playlists. And, it's the one that, like I go and do like emo nights and things like that. Well, I'll DJ those things, and like, Memory is the one that most people know, and even if I'm not DJing, someone else will be sending me like clips like, oh, I saw some cover band on the East Coast playing Memory, or I saw someone DJing at emo night and they were playing Memory. And a lot of people know it, which is cool. I mean, it's really fun. We had a few songs, that got on the radio. Like I said, Pretty Girl off of Start Static and Bouncing Off the Walls, and to some degree Stuck in America. But Memory is probably the one that like, it's probably the one that if you're going to have a Sugarcult song on your playlist, it's probably going to be Memory, although our fans all have their own opinions. I put something on our like Sugarcult Facebook page, and it's like, what's your memory? What are your like favorite memories of Palm Trees and Power Lines? And everyone has like, a lot of people love She's the Blade. A lot of people love Where's December. A lot of people love, Head Up. A lot of just, which is just cool, yeah, it's a trip. It's a trip, man. I still can't believe it. I can't believe that our little band did something that anybody cares about, because I still think of us as just these like, dorky dudes from Santa Barbara playing a little dive bar in front of our friends, it's wild.
You've come far. You've come far. I mean, this is great. I love talking. Again, I don't want to sell it short of just talking palm trees. We get to talk about so much. But as we kind of start to conclude this, when we look at, I know we keep kind of talking to that trilogy way with Start Static, Palm Trees and Power Lines, and Lights Out. Where does kind of Palm Trees fall in terms of, and I don't know favorites. This goes, some people don't have favorites. Maybe you do have a favorite, but where's this album kind of fall in that trilogy? I mean, you know, is it personally your favorite? Is it somewhere like, you know, I think you get what I say. Where's it kind of fall in that trilogy for you personally?
Yeah, that's a hard question. You know, it's always a hard question to ask someone from a band because
Yeah.
you know, it's like asking your parents who their favorite sibling is, you know. Um, but I think there's something about each record that is really, I know this is a really like politician-y answer, but like there really
Okay.
is like something about each record that that is endemic to the record, you know, like no matter what. Start Static was our first record. It was our handshake with the world. It was the record that changed our lives. We went from being a local band to being, you know, an international band. We went from, you know, Tim went from folding sweaters at J. Crew to, you know, buying a house because of the songs he wrote. You know what I mean? So we became professional musicians because of Start Static, and that's something. There's always going to be something about that. Again, it was our first record, so we didn't really know what we were doing. It was kind of the learning curve, kind of growing up in front of the camera. But so with Palm Trees, that will what makes Palm Trees really just what distinguishes that record is our first record we were able to make as professionals. You know, we made Start Static as, I mean, we walked into the studio to make Start Static. Aaron was still a student; he was still in college. You know, I quit my job like the day before we started making the record. You know, like we went from being like just local dudes to going into a studio and making a record. So what with Palm Trees, we were like, you know, pretty accomplished. We had toured around the world. We had played big festival crowds. We had, you know, really like seen, like we played the Warped Tour 2 summers in a row, 2001 and 2002. So we had a real feel for like, you know, just how it all works. And, you know, we all learned a lot about, we became better musicians. Tim learned a hell of a lot. He became really obsessed with learning about recording. So we learned, you know, we were able to articulate what we wanted in the studio and not just kind of be at the mercy of the engineers and the producers. And we felt like much more confident in our identity as a band and who we were and what we were going for. And so that record, again, is distinguished like that. Now with Lights Out, that was the one where it was like, okay, now we've done a lot of stuff. Now we've toured with Green Day. We've done the main stages at festivals. We've done our own headlining tours. We've even, you know, we've all been able to like buy houses and, you know, like become like rock and roll grownups. And we, you know, we went into Lights Out with, and the record company at the time was like swinging for the fences. They were like, you guys are going to be the next Green Day, you know? So we went into Lights Out with this, like, I won't say attitude, but this like feeling of like empowerment, like, wow, this is going to be like, you know, this is going to be the record. Like we had Start Static was our handshake. Palm Trees was kind of like this. Palm Trees kind of sealed the deal, and Lights Out is going to be the one that like blows up and turns us into like a household name, like, you know, No Doubt or Weezer or the Foo Fighters or Green Day or whatever. So we went into Lights Out with that attitude, and ironically, the record company went out of business, and the record. So Lights Out will always kind of be the proverbial like kind of one that got away. It was like we went into it thinking that was going to be the big giant breakthrough that like delivered Sugarcult, like out, catapulted us out of the like Warped Tour world and into like the mainstream of just the world, you know, like, and unfortunately the way the winds blew, you know, we had a lot of really favorable weather for most of our life as a band, but unfortunately the winds kind of took a turn and shifted during Lights Out, and we just kind of were victims of circumstances because the record company, you know, the parent company that owned the record company pulled basically pulled the plug on the label. Everyone at the label lost their job, and we weren't able to get past, we had only released one single, and we were supposed to have 4 singles for Lights Out. So it was kind of cut short. And that really sort of like cut us off at our knees as a band, because then it was like this real long stage of like wilderness and kind of purgatory, not knowing what if anything was going to happen next. And it killed a lot of our momentum, took a lot of the wind out of our sails, and ultimately is probably like the catalyst for why we, kind of eventually just sort of stopped doing stuff, sadly. I still think we should make another record. I'm like,
I love one.
Like, we need to make Lights On. We need to come back now. And, but unfortunately, Tim is just, we're all still really great friends, but, just to be totally honest, like Tim has he really struggles with tinnitus. And actually you see clues of this. If you watch the Back to the Disaster DVD, if you watch that documentary film we made, you see some like clues that, even back then, like there was a tour we had to suddenly like do a US tour, semi-acoustic, because he had like a big freak out with his ears. And so that was always this kind of sleeping giant in our band. Tim had this like really severe tinnitus, and he has like pretty bad anxiety. So it was really hard to manage. And now it's like the idea of like doing more Sugarcult stuff. It's like, it's really like, it's hard because we have some opportunities right now. There's as I'm sure there's a big 20-year anniversary of Palm Trees, and there's a big resurgence as When We Were Young festival. There's all these things, but we, Tim's just not, Tim has to put his like health and his physical and mental health, before all that, which is it's like, I always feel bad because you try to explain it to fans. You don't want your fans to think we don't appreciate them. You don't want people to think that we're like oblivious to the fact that there's a lot of interest in Sugarcult and our era at this point. But just the idea of like going out and doing some shows or even making another record is just kind of off the table. Although I've never said this before to anybody, but for the first time ever, we're toying with the idea, and I don't want to get ahead of myself or jinx it, but like we're toying with the idea of trying to find a way to do it, even if we have to do it without Tim, which I don't know about yet. So you're hearing it here first. We're still thinking about that and talking about it with him and feeling it out. And if you've listened to this, you're almost 2 hours in, so you get to be privy to the deep, dark inner circle of trust with Sugarcult. But like, I just don't know how that looks. There's a part of me that feels weird about it, but there's also a part of me that feels weird about never playing a Sugarcult show again, because I feel like we kind of like, our band is bigger than the sum of its parts. And I know that if I couldn't play a Sugarcult show, I wouldn't want Sugarcult to never play a show again. I feel like our band is bigger than any one of us, including our singer, and our songs are really our legacy. And if we can go out there and do it in a dignified way, then it's at least worth trying,
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
As a fan, I would definitely have interest in that. Like, I would love to see that, because like you're saying too, it's not just one guy in the band. There's still 3. You know what I mean?
Well, to be real, he is the voice of the band. So like, it's like Sublime with Rome. You know what I mean? You're like, but if that's the only way you can see it, then I'm just for me, it's like it's a weighing it out. It's like, it's been 20 years since we made that record. 20 years from now, maybe we're gonna be too old to be able to do that. And like, it's like you kind of go, if not now, when? And the answer is pretty much never. So you kind of go, well, it's either like some version of it. It's like, I would rather try something. Personally, I never like to make like fear-based decisions. So I'd rather, what do they say? It's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. I would rather try something and see if it's cool. And then turns out it's cool. Awesome. Let's do this. And if it's not cool, go, well, at least we tried, rather than just speculate and go, well, it would probably be lame, so let's never do it,
Yep.
And then like fade away and have people stop talking about our band, and we kind of write ourselves out of the history books. And that would be a shame, because I feel like our band, regardless of whether we ever make another record again, we did a thing, and it should be kept in the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Again, there's a reason we talked about this record 20 years later. It's good. The music's still good all these years later.
Yeah. I mean, the only way I'd ever make another Sugarcult record is with Tim. But as far as like maybe doing a show or a festival show or something like that, I would consider it, as long as Tim was cool with it, because, that's how it has to be. We're family,
But I never got to see Sugarcult live. I think it'd be neat. I know it's all talk, but from a fan perspective, yeah, I think that would be cool. Yeah. That's all I
But it has to be dignified, because I mean, you can go look around on YouTube and you find, I mean, Tim made this point, and I totally agree with him. It's like, if you Google, it's most of the footage you find of us live, we are like razor sharp, and it looks cool, it sounds cool, and I love that. So like, I wouldn't want to do it unless we could do it like to that standard. You know what I mean? Because you see some bands and they're just out there like, dude, these guys are just trying to like grab the bag and try to retire. And I'm like, I just can't. No. You know what I mean? Rock and roll matters. Rock and roll matters to me too much. You know what I mean?
No, I don't. I feel like
I'd sooner go get a job at Del Taco than go out there and do something if it was lame, if it wasn't dignified, No,
I get that vibe. I don't think that's why I also wouldn't mind like if you guys did it, because I don't see you just doing it like half-heartedly. I don't think it's something that you're just like, whatever, we have an offer, let's find another singer. It sounds like if you ever did it, it was well thought out, and it's really going to be something good of quality that stands up with the rest of
it would have to be. It would have to be. Yeah.
But
it would have to be.
That is,
honestly, it's like everyone is responsible for every artist is responsible for their own legacy and their own like integrity. You can do it and phone it in, and people are going to buy tickets to it. You can do it and have it be awesome, and people are going to buy tickets to it. It's like, the reason you do it has to come from your own personal, like sort of your own personal moral compass and standard of like excellence. Because like, even when we were an active band back in the day, we go out on the Warped Tour and we're like, dude, you do realize like we could go out there with leather jackets zipped all the way up to our necks and tight jeans on, and our guitars slung down to our knees like Joan Jett in Florida in July. Or we could go out there with shorts on and a Motion City Soundtrack t-shirt and have our guitars up to here. And most people are probably not going to care that much. But this many people that are going to care that much, ourselves included, is why we're going to like put on these leather jackets and go out there and rock out and look cool as shit and do it. It's like we could go out there in flip-flops and it would be a lot more comfortable than going out there in Beatle boots. But I want these pictures to look cool in 20 years. It's worth it. And it's like, I look at other bands. I remember we used to have a really big crush on the band Mars Volta, which was like, you wouldn't think, like two of our biggest like style crushes were probably Mars Volta and Refused.
Oh, nice.
We were like, I love how those bands, like, they're, especially because they were like in the hardcore scene, it's like they could just as easily go out there in a boxy t-shirt and wear shorts and shave their heads and just rock out. But they looked so cool every time you saw them. They looked like they were like from creatures from another planet, and it just separated them from like the world. It wasn't like, like it made them just look larger than life, and it just looked so cool. It was like, I want that to be I want Sugarcult to like, I want people to look at Sugarcult and go, wow, those guys they don't just look like kids in the crowd, they look like weirdos from another planet, Oh,
I love it.
But at the same time, we're not, that doesn't mean we're better than the kids in the crowd. It doesn't mean we think we're cool. It just means like, we want to like let our freak flags fly and just kind of be part of the resistance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, no. I love it, man. I love it. as we we're talking 20 years of palm trees and power lines. How about
We're
right
talking
now?
for 20 years about palm trees and power lines.
How about, is there anything else coming up in the world of Marko DeSantis you want to tell people about? You got anything else going on currently?
Oh man. Well, nothing that I haven't already hinted at, but so certain things that I'm probably like already like shouldn't have said anything about, but I'm thinking about that kind of stuff. But there's nothing like, there's no other real like big project in the works that I'm gonna give you the big scoop on, but I definitely have some things there's definitely some things I need to do at this stage of time. I'm starting to, I've needed to write a book for a long time, and I keep
Yes.
waiting for things to slow down enough. And, that's something I want to do. I love to write. I collect all these little vignettes of stories that I constantly write. And one day I've actually contributed a lot of stories to a lot of really cool books that have come out recently. There was a book, oh, where is it? I think it's my other part of the house, but there was a book my friend just put out called Generation Blue that you should be aware of. So the guy who did the Popsicle record with me, S.W. Loudon,
Oh, yeah.
Steve, yeah. So he put out a new book called Generation Blue, and it's all about like how Weezer's Blue album, which also celebrates its 30th anniversary this year.
God damn.
I know. How that record really changed the scene in LA, and a lot of bands that were sort of around in and around that thing. And it's sort of like, it's almost like a story about the Weezer album without being a story about the Weezer album. It's a story about the whole culture around that record and all their friends and the bands, the people that moved out to LA with Rivers when he first moved to LA from Connecticut, and how they all formed bands. And I was definitely part of that scene because I had the band Popsicle. We used to play with Weezer back in those days. So I had this whole life before Sugarcult. And so so I contributed a whole bunch to that book. So look up Generation Blue. That just came out like maybe a month ago. I actually went and played a show. We did a big release party for it, and I played a show. I sat in with our friend's band, Rydell High, who was a band from back in that era, and it just felt good to play. Like we played like a 5-song set. I actually played bass for that. It was super fun.
Oh, nice.
Felt good and Nerf Herder played. A bunch of our friends' bands played. And so that's new. What else is coming up? Yeah, I really enjoy the writing stuff. I've been doing some like taking some of my photography, which isn't like fine art photography, but it's mostly just like I always took snapshots during the all the years of touring. And there's a girl who does a thing called Punk Rock and Paintbrushes, and she's been featuring some of my stuff in her exhibits. And so there's a tiny part of me that kind of wants to do. I've actually thought about this, and for Palm Trees and Power Lines, we unfortunately, because of like master rights issues and a bunch of boring stuff, we can't do vinyl right now, because we wanted to do vinyl, but we can't do it. But I thought about, and I'm going to have some time this summer, so maybe this is what I'm going to work on, is, going through all the photos I took, from back in the Palm Trees era, and just finding I saved, like, I have all the memorabilia from all of our like, posters and flyers and merch and everything, and set lists, and photos, and compiling it all together and making like a little limited edition book of some sort just for Sugarcult, Palm Trees and Power Lines, and make it like, maybe it comes with like a download code for some unreleased music, live version of Memory or something like that. So I've thought about something like that, which could be really cool. There's another project that I've got in that I don't know if I'm gonna have time to make this happen, but there's so many amazing new artists. I work with a lot of new artists, like emerging, like even just people that are like 17 and like they're making their first batch of songs. A lot of artists that are emerging. And I had this idea where it was like, be kind of fun to have them record their interpretations of songs off of Palm Trees and Power Lines.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And I don't know if it would actually come out as like something that would be available for people to stream or buy on vinyl or whatever, or if it would become like a YouTube series or just something that we put out on our social media. But I just kind of want to do this thing where, like, instead of making it all about us, making it kind of like using our songs to like shake hands with like a generation of people that weren't even maybe born when that record came out. So, I was working with this really cool girl who's she's like maybe 19 or 20, and she's like a Phoebe Bridgers type of songwriter. And I kind of just like, I was like, I'm challenging you to pick a Sugarcult song off of Palm Trees and Power Lines and cover it. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then she came up to me like a month later and was like, oh, by the way, I did that challenge. And she like played me her version of Sign Off. And it was like staggering. It was so good. And it made me think like, this is so cool. This is a girl that wasn't even born yet when this record came out. And she's since like grew up, learned how to play music. And then, and so I thought, wouldn't that be a cool project? Get like people that were like, you have to be like 20 or below, and then record a version of a song off of Palm Trees to like hand it off to the next generation and see like, it's just I think that's just kind of interesting, you know, as
That's
a music
great
fan.
idea,
It's kind of interesting. And, you know, for fans of Sugarcult, it would be like, it'd be fun to, it would just remind them to maybe go back and listen to our songs, but it's also be kind of cool to hear. And I thought about maybe making it primarily female, like where you have mostly like women musicians doing their versions of Sugarcult songs.
That'd be
and
cool.
Like, you know, keep kind of trying to limit it to people that were born from 2004 forward, you know, which would just be kind of cool. So I've been sort of putting that out to a few people that I think are good. And we'll see if we can get that together. So I don't know. We'll think of some innovative and creative way to celebrate the 20-year anniversary. If nothing else, we'll have this podcast.
Well, I mean, you're a great follow on social media. So why don't you tell people where to go find you online and all that good stuff. And if you have anything else to plug as well, anything you want people to go check out, you know, plug away. Let us know what's going on.
Yeah, well, you know, like I said, anytime I do a podcast where I talk for more than 2 hours, you should probably check yourself in to be evaluated, because you clearly are a little bit crazy if you've been listening for 2 hours to all of my psychobabble. But you also, if you want to check me out on Instagram, it's Marko DeSantis, just, you know, MarkoDesantis. And yeah, follow me, maybe throw a link to my Instagram handle on your thing, on your show notes or whatever. And, you know, like I said, like I'm pretty accessible. If you want to DM me, or if you have a question about Sugarcult or Palm Trees or whatever that I didn't answer on this, hit me up, and I usually respond to DMs. And yeah, that's it.
Very nice. Well, if you're listening to the podcast, it's over. If you're listening to the radio show, it's 3 hours. So we're going to play Palm Trees and Power Lines after this. We talked about it for 2 hours. We'll play the whole record. We'll play it front to back.
All right.
Anything else as we close this out? Some people may be listening. Maybe they listened for 2 hours and have never heard this record at all. Maybe they just heard us talk about a record for 2 hours and they're just about to hear it for the first time.
Well, hopefully, you know what, this record is, to me, this record's a road record. It was like, we made it on the road. It was it's inspired by life on the road. And as it turns out, I feel like it's a really good listen. I mean, we almost came to blows over the sequence of it. So like, I can send you, I've got like pictures of all the emails back and forth of like us arguing over which song should be first and second. And
that was a question I didn't get to. I was going to ask you about if there were any other sequencings, and it sounds like there was a story.
Oh yeah. We had a lot of strong opinions, and but you know, the sequence of a record, meaning like which order the songs are in, like to me, it's really important. I mean, talk about Weezer's Blue record. It's like, you can't imagine that record. I listened to that record from start to finish, and it works so perfectly. It's like, you just, you know, each one of the songs is great a la carte, but when you listen to it as a course and it just goes from start to end, and it ends with Only in Dreams, and that's just that long thing at the end. It's such a great record. And to me, like, I'm kind of old fashioned in that regard. It's like every Sugarcult record was made with that attitude of, you know, this sort of romantic ideal of people are going to listen to this record from start to finish. They're not going to like cherry pick and like skip tracks, or like, you know, they're just going to listen to this whole record. So we really, all three of our records are very meticulously sequenced. And like I said, we were willing to like lose teeth over it and like lose friends over it. We were like, you know, very, very had really strong conviction about what we thought the way the record how the record should go. And so I want to invite people, if you're listening to this podcast, you know, maybe you're on a road trip, it's summertime, maybe you're going on a vacation, a long flight, or maybe you're on a long drive. You know, this is I think this is a really good record for when you're on the road. Cause it was, like I said, this record is a document of a young band's, you know, 3 years of nonstop being on the road. So I think it's kind of meta to like listen to it when you're actually on the road. So if you're on a road trip with your friends, if you're on a long road trip by yourself, if you're on a long like hike or like, you know, flight, or if you're in a band and you're on tour, you know, listen to this thing and see what you think. Yeah. So
I love
that's
it.
what I would do.
I mean, Marko, hopefully not the last time we have you on the show. We'll do it again for something. We'll have you on again.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Always good talking to you, Anthony. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm Anthony Merchant talking to Marko DeSantis, 20 years of palm trees and power lines right here on the Power Chord Hour.